This woman should be in jail. Literally, Hillary Clinton should be behind bars. And so should the people who worked for her who did this. This is so blatantly corrupt. She wanted to distract from her email scandal. She cooked up a plan to accuse Trump of being a Russian agent in order to distract.
Hillary Clinton has spent decades crafting an image of inevitability, a political juggernaut destined to shape history. But when Megyn Kelly goes after her, inevitability turns into vulnerability. The roast doesn't just poke fun at Hillary's missteps, it tears down the entire mythology around her. Every forced smile, every canned laugh, every speech dripping with entitlement becomes a punchline. Megyn strips the gloss off the Clinton brand, exposing it not as a symbol of power, but as a monument to failure.
His first term as president. These absolute liars who run around trying to act like they're the protectors of democracy completely ruined it, tried to undermine it at every turn and at the highest levels with lies, with out and out lies that were really serious and changed foreign policy and changed the course of history in this country in Trump's presidency. And
the roast begins with the most obvious contradiction: Hillary's lifelong pursuit of power and her inability to connect with people. Megyn frames it as cruel irony. The woman who wanted to be the most relatable leader in America never mastered the art of being relatable. Every attempt at authenticity felt staged. Every effort to seem just like you landed like a poorly rehearsed skit. Megyn drives home the point that Hillary's greatest political liability was herself, her failure to convince anyone she was genuine.
Scandal. She made up a scandal about Trump being a Russian asset. And they banked on the intel agencies working with her to perpetuate this lie, and it appears they were only too happy to assist. That's what this scandal's about. Pieces of it we knew. New pieces are coming in by the day thanks to these declassifications. And
then comes the greatest humiliation of her career, the 2016 election. Megyn paints the scene vividly. Hillary backed by the media establishment, Hollywood elites, billionaires, and global donors, only to lose to Donald Trump, a man the establishment dismissed as a political clown. Megyn doesn't soften the blow, she amplifies it. Hillary didn't just lose an election, she lost the one she was expected to win with ease. The roast frames it as the biggest political choke in American history, a collapse so epic it rewrote the playbook for modern politics. Megyn dives into Hillary's entitlement, mocking how she treated the presidency like a coronation. Hillary didn't campaign like someone earning votes. She campaigned like someone already measuring drapes for the Oval Office. The arrogance was so blatant, her slogan might as well have been, "It's my turn." Megyn skewers this mindset by reminding viewers that voters don't like being told what's inevitable. They like being convinced. And Hillary never convinced anyone. She demanded loyalty and was stunned when it never came.
Has a very weird and I think shitty marriage. I don't think she has a husband who is in love with her or faithful to her. And I think I can't really blame him because she seems to have accepted this behavior since the inception of their marriage. And so past his prologue, you're going to get what you tolerate. You know, what you permit, you promote. She spent all of her daughter's upbringing away, at work, at the law firm.
The scandals give endless ammo. From Whitewater to Benghazi to her private email server, Megyn rips through the list with sharp precision, noting how none were ever truly resolved. Hillary's legacy isn't leadership, it's surviving scandal after scandal, not by clearing her name, but by outlasting outrage. Megyn underscores the irony. A woman who wanted to be remembered for breaking glass ceilings is instead remembered for dodging glass shards from every controversy trailing her.
Very different ballgame today than it was even 4 years ago, never mind 8 or 10 years ago when she was doing all this. And back to Hillary, you know, the whole, she has a hat she's tweeted herself out wearing, but her emails. She's tried to turn it into this ridiculous joke, like, oh, but the moon landing, like you nutcases who are still railing about this made-up scandal.
Hillary Clinton dropped an op-ed in the New York Times today titled, "How Much Dumber Will This Get?" She used Signalgate and the messaging from Pete Hegseth, Mike Wallace, J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, and others as her jumping-off point to argue just how absurd the conversation has become.
Clinton decided to drop an op-ed in the New York Times today that's entitled, "How much dumber will this get?" And she uses Signalgate and the messaging by Pete Hegseth and Mike Wallace and JD Vance and Tulsi and others on there as the jumping off point to talk about.
Megyn doesn't stop at the scandals. She skewers Hillary's refusal to take criticism. Hillary has a habit of blaming everyone but herself. The FBI, Russia, sexism, the media, even the voters. Megyn roasts this as the ultimate dodge of accountability, landing the hardest punch by pointing out that Hillary blames the very people she claimed to represent. Losing because the working class didn't vote for you is one thing. Blaming them for not appreciating you is another. That's not leadership. It's resentment dressed up as analysis. The image of Hillary as a trailblazer gets torn apart too. Megyn argues Hillary's entire career was built on Bill Clinton's rise. Without his presidency, she never would have had the platform to launch her own. Megyn slices through the myth. Hillary didn't shatter barriers alone. She walked through doors already opened by her husband's power.
And Chelsea Clinton is not a nice person. And I think really is just sort of getting along based on the family name at this point. And so now she's got a daughter who I guess married a rich guy but is struggling in her own right. Hillary's in a loveless marriage. She probably doesn't have a lot of real friends, just people who are glommers. And so she absolutely does have to write a fifth memoir and go on MSNBC and be told that she's amazing.
And speaking of Bill, Megyn doesn't ignore the elephant in the room. Hillary built her brand as a defender of women, yet stood by Bill through decades of allegations and misconduct. Megyn skewers the hypocrisy. The so-called champion of women was also the most visible enabler of a man accused by many of exploitation. The roast is brutal but fair. Hillary's feminism seemed to matter only when it was politically convenient. When loyalty to Bill was at stake, principles vanished. Hillary's stage presence becomes another punchline. Megyn mocks the awkward gestures, robotic laughs, and failed attempts at humor that landed with the grace of a broken robot. Hillary tried to appear warm and relatable, but the harder she tried, the more it looked like an SNL parody. Megyn likens it to Siri trying to tell jokes, effort without humanity. She hammers it home with the perfect metaphor. Hillary standing in front of cameras, forcing a smile, holding a bright red reset button labeled wrong. It was slapstick comedy dressed up as strategy.
Need to distract from that email scandal, which was around her neck like an albatross. Trust me, we were covering it every night on the Kelly File at Fox News. She had clearly violated the law with that homebrew server that had been accessed by foreign agents. She compromised national intelligence information. She did things she would never have allowed.
Megyn also goes after Hillary's constant habit of playing the victim. Every loss, scandal, or stumble is repackaged as something done to her, never something she caused. Megyn turns this into a biting gag, likening her to a boxer who gets knocked out cold, yet insists the referee, the crowd, and even the lighting were to blame. The roast stings because it exposes what many suspected. Hillary Clinton was never as strong as she wanted people to believe. Megyn then hits the wealth angle. Hillary often rails against inequality and money's influence, but the hypocrisy is so glaring it becomes impossible to ignore, and Megyn makes sure the audience doesn't miss it. Her post-election career fuels the roast further. Instead of gracefully exiting the stage, Hillary has spent years reliving 2016 like a ghost stuck in her own political purgatory. The endless books, interviews, and documentaries look less like resilience and more like obsession. Megyn paints her as a washed-up athlete replaying old game tapes for anyone willing to watch. The punchline is simple but brutal. Hillary Clinton cannot move on, yet the world already has.
Hillary Clinton decided to drop an op-ed in the New York Times today that's entitled, "How much dumber will this get?" And she uses Signalgate and the messaging by Pete Hegseth and Mike Wallace and JD Vance and Tulsi and others on there as the jumping off point to talk about how dumb the Trump administration.
Megyn also skewers Hillary's relentless attempts at rebranding. Each new phase, First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State, presidential candidate, came with a new slogan, a new look, and a new Hillary. But no matter how many times she reinvented herself, the public always saw through it. Megyn compares it to a bad movie rebooted every few years with a new cast and flashy marketing, only for audiences to walk out halfway through. The problem wasn't the packaging, it was the product. By the time Megyn is finished, Hillary Clinton is no longer the titan of inevitability she built herself up to be. She's the punchline of her own ambition, a cautionary tale of what happens when entitlement collides with reality. Megyn doesn't just roast Hillary's politics. She dismantles her persona, career, and myth. What's left is not the unstoppable force Hillary once claimed to be, but a reminder that sometimes the biggest illusion in politics is believing you were destined to win. Megyn Kelly makes sure the audience doesn't just laugh at Hillary's flaws, they witness the collapse of her entire narrative laid bare.
Just weighed in publicly again on why she lost. And just in case you were thinking it was because she didn't go to Wisconsin, you are wrong. It is you, women of America. It is your fault. She now sits down for an interview and decides that the reason she didn't win is American females. That they didn't like that she...
Megyn doesn't stop at Hillary's political failures. She digs into the contradictions that have defined her entire persona. Hillary built her brand as a champion of women, yet her career is filled with moments where she tossed women aside whenever it served her ambition. Megyn skewers the hypocrisy with precision, reminding the audience that Hillary's feminism has always been conditional, a costume for the cameras, discarded in backroom deals. The comedy writes itself. Despite decades in politics, Hillary has never shaken her reputation for being inauthentic. The awkward chuckles, stiff interactions, and over-polished attempts at relatability all become punchlines. Megyn paints it as the performance of a woman who has spent a lifetime trying to convince the world she's human, and still hasn't nailed the role.
She puts out this tweet, and it's a picture of her, a much younger Hillary, and the caption on the hat reads, "But her emails." And she writes in her tweet, "Bringing this back in light of recent news. Get a limited edition But Her Emails hat and support Onward Together groups working to strengthen our democracy." The nerve of this woman to have committed federal crimes and to have gotten off because James Comey didn't have the spine to bring it. And now seeing her political opponent get a different result and trying to take some sort of "I told you, but my emails, that was never a thing" lap is...
Then comes the irony of Hillary's obsession with power, which Megyn flips into a punchline. Hillary wanted the presidency so badly that the desperation itself became her downfall. She spent decades stacking titles and scripting her legacy, only to discover the public wasn't buying it. Megyn frames her as a tragic figure with every credential but no charisma, a polished product that expired on the shelf. The roast sharpens when Megyn likens her 2016 campaign to a high-budget film that bombed. The marketing was everywhere, the money poured in, the reviews glowed, yet the audience still walked out. Hillary didn't lose because of some grand conspiracy, Megyn jabs. She lost because voters simply didn't want what she was selling. The list of culprits she's blamed since FBI, media, misogyny, Russia, James Comey, the Electoral College is longer than her memoir.
And that leaves me back to Schellenberger here. This is page 4 of his report. He writes as follows: the Russian reports, again, that the Dutch spied on, that we got our hands on, also claimed, and listen to this, I mean, you probably already know this stuff, Glenn, but claimed that Attorney General Loretta Lynch, okay, this is back in 2016, people, remember, Obama's president, Loretta Lynch is his Attorney General, and her DOJ/FBI are investigating the Hillary Clinton email scandal. And also now we learn simultaneously working with the Hillary Clinton campaign to...
Megyn mocks Hillary's greatest political skill, turning her own failures into endless blame games. At some point, Megyn points out, if everyone else is always at fault, maybe the problem was never them in the first place. Hillary's desperate attempt to cling to relevance after 2016 becomes another goldmine. Megyn dismantles the image of her as a behind-the-scenes kingmaker, dropping hints in interviews, floating comebacks, and pretending the country still waits for her return. It's the political version of a washed-up rock star who thinks the crowd is chanting their name when the stadium is empty. By the end, Hillary doesn't look like a titan of politics at all. That's the sting. Megyn shows that the very things Hillary thought were her strengths, experience, ambition, and trailblazer status, were the same weapons that undid her. This isn't just a roast. It's a ruthless unmasking of the myth Hillary spent decades trying to sell,